I'm really excited about this video today because we're going to give you an opportunity to see inside the workings at Freedom Financial Planning and how we serve our clients, generally corporate professionals who are about 10 to 15 years away from retirement. And so this family went from a position where they were going to run out of money at the age of 85, having retired at 65. Liquidity would be a problem at 85. And now we've got a situation where 112 is potentially where liquidity becomes a problem. And so this is how we were able to work with this family who, I suppose, took the leap, had the courage to come to us and get a bit vulnerable and to discuss how they're just tired and how they want options. And so since we implemented this plan with this particular family, they've been able to have a different lease on life. They've been able to feel much more energized at work, much more positive about the future. And in fact, work is not so much of a problem anymore, simply because they know that they have options. The great thing about this experience that we had with this family is by using what they already have, but optimizing it and being more strategic about their financial decisions, we were able to shave 5 years off of their expected working career. And so I'm going to take you now through their financials, talk you through at a high level the interventions that they agreed to, and then we can look at how that impacted their futures. Welcome to Family Dube's Asset Map. Family Dube have various assets, insurances, income, and so on. And so this asset map that we use, which is a software program that creates this mind map, it just helps us and our clients visualize their financials well. Instead of having a spreadsheet with lots of rows and columns and numbers that confuse everybody, we can visually see what this family has within their portfolio, within their estate, and we can dive into each factor. So let me just spend a minute just explaining the outline of this family's portfolio. Now, obviously, I've used some fictitious names here, and I've reworked some of the numbers so that it doesn't reflect exact clients that we work with. But overall, this profile and this financial profile could be a stencil of our current ideal client. And so what I can start off with here is on the left-hand side. This is cash flow. And so over here, we've got income for this family. Now, in this family, the husband is actually full-time employed as a senior manager and an executive at a company. Years ago, his wife stopped working. And so these financials are, for the most part, on his name. And so these incomes are his incomes. Firstly, we've got the guaranteed income of $3.5 million a year, roughly, in salary. And then there's also a performance bonus of roughly $1.5 million every year. There's also expenses over here, which are in red. And these expenses are what we think their retirement living expenses will be based on how much they spend at the moment. Now, children are out of the house for this family, and so they're spending on themselves. So in present value, it's $60,000 a month in living expenses or $720,000 a year. And then for medical aid, we have about 115,000 Rand a year expenditure. The system itself will increase that with inflation over time. What we've also got is retirement funds. So Mr. Dube has a retirement annuity that he converted from a pension fund he was at years ago at another company, and that is worth about 4.7 million Rand. And he's got his company pension fund, which at the moment is worth about 14.5 million Rand. Then on the right-hand side here, we have other investments that are not retirement funds. Now, this is something we see all the time. This tells us that years ago, some financial advisor from some insurance company sold Mr. Dube quite a few products. And so we have several endowments, 3 endowments in this instance, one of 900,000 Rand, one of 500,000 Rand, and another of 400,000 Rand. And these endowments were taken out many years ago. They've matured, so to speak, many years ago, but they've just been languishing there. Now, one issue we have here with this family, and one of the reasons they came to us, is not just because they want to make work optional as soon as possible, not because they just want to leave the corporate rat race as soon as possible, but also because they have this money market account, private bank that they have an account with, and it's their interest earning account that they have placed their excess cash in. At the moment, this client is building this up over every month by about 20 or so thousand Rand. And the reason is simply because he has finished paying off his mortgages, his bonds on his property. So now he's got extra money available every month to do something with. Now, what does he want to do? He's got extra money available and he wants to stop working as soon as possible. So he needs to make a lot of good decisions with his finances to make that happen. And at the moment, because he's got a bit of analysis paralysis, because he's read all the books and listened to the podcasts and he doesn't know what to do with his money, it's sitting in a money market bank account. Now, over and above his investments and the family's retirement funds, they also have property. They have their home, which is based in an estate worth about 6.1 million rand. It is fully paid off. And they have a holiday home on the coast in Plettenberg Bay. And that is worth roughly about 2 million rand. They spend a decent amount of time there every year, but now they live in the city, up country, because they're working hard. However, in retirement, they might want to spend a lot more time there. They do get rental income from this from time to time using Airbnb, but we don't want to count on that rental income in retirement because it might not be there, especially if they decide to live in that home. And then lastly, at the top here, we have his insurances. Now, Mrs. Dube stopped working many years ago and her employee benefits fell by the wayside. But Mr. Dube does have quite a few employee benefits. So you can see here he's got group life cover. That is, if he dies, the family gets this money and it's 10.5 million rand. It's several multiples of his salary. Then he has group disability income cover. And he has critical illness cover. He's also got this other insurance cover in his personal name of about 2.75 million rand. So that's life cover with another insurance company outside of his corporate benefits. If I can quickly just dive into one or two facts over here. If we look at his, Mr. Dube's pension fund, when he came to us, we realized that because he had finished paying off his bond, at the same time, he had the option of contributing more to his retirement fund. You know, every year at work, you get this form that you can complete. And so following the wisdom of the crowd, he listened to them, and people always say, put as much money into your pension fund as possible. And so he did. And so he upped his contributions to roughly 610,000 rand a year going towards that retirement fund alone. Now that's amazing because it's going to grow nicely, but the tax deduction is limited on that. And I'll get to that just now. Now he's also got a retirement annuity. And there's a small debit order of 3,000 rand a month that's been in place forever. It's never escalated. It's an old legacy retirement annuity. It's quite expensive. So that's kind of an afterthought since he moved that years ago from another employer. And then furthermore, these endowments, there are still these legacy debit orders of just a few rands every month ticking over in the background. And then I mentioned earlier on the money market account. It started at zero not too many years ago. And now it's got to a point of about 2 million rand is there earning interest. 2 million rand earning interest every year, which is not particularly tax efficient. When we looked through his statements over the last 3 months, we worked out that on average per year, he's probably contributing about 250,000 into this money market account. So it's surplus cash. And like I said, this is quite common for a lot of the clients that come to us. Once the debt is paid off or close to paid off, children are starting to leave the house, don't know what to do with that additional surplus cash. So this is their situation. And as you can see, maybe if you've done the math already, born 1971. So Mr. Dube himself is 55 years old. And he came to us saying that his company says at 65, he has to retire. And he's happy to retire then, although he would ideally like to stop this sooner and to rather make work optional. And so what I mean by making work optional is he is tired of being accountable to a boss, of having to get to work, to travel to all around the world for conferences. He's got a lot of skills and experience, and he would like the opportunity to consult maybe in a few years' time to manage his own cash flow, his own income, his own time, his own demands. And so Mr. Dube wants the option of working or not. It's incredibly liberating to know that you don't need to be at that job at the time. And then you can start exercising your right to work for yourself. And so he wanted to know how soon he can do that. However, using the numbers he has available before seeing us, did some back of the napkin calculations. And he believed that he wouldn't be able to retire and he'd probably have to work for many more years. So when we started off with him, we said, well, what does your situation look like if you just carried on the way you are now? You carried on contributing to this money market account, this retirement annuity, this pension fund. What would life look for you if you retire at 65? And so what we do is we moved over to our cash flow modeling software. And we put all of that data in, including all of the fees, all of the escalations, all of the investment assumptions, everything else that you can think of is built into this, as well as taxation. And the outcome, based on the lifestyle that this family wants to live, is that at retirement, they would, at 65, they would have enough capital to afford the income they need to match their expenses that they would have until the age 85. That means that from the pension fund, they get enough income coming in to pay for their groceries, to pay for everything else. However, at age 85, so 20 years into retirement, that would be a problem because they would have maximized the withdrawals from their retirement funds, their living annuity, and furthermore, their other money, the discretionary capital that they have, those endowments, the bank account, those would all be depleted. And then they wouldn't be able to afford these dots. And these dots are goals. And you can see these goals here. If I click onto the goals menu, there's international travel, which we said, well, they said at the moment they're taking once a year, the two of them about 120,000 Rand a year. And so we said, well, what if you you carry on traveling until an age of maybe 80. So you don't want to jump on a plane and fly for 12 hours beyond the age of 80. Local travel is about 50,000 Rand every year spent just driving around the country, weekends away, or whatever the case may be. And then finally, a dream car. There's a certain car that this client wanted to own. He wasn't going to buy it brand new, but he was going to buy it probably 4 or 5 years old. And he believed after trading in his current car, he would still need to pay in another 1.2 million Rand. This car is super reliable. It can take him anywhere in Africa that he wants to travel to. And it's going to last him for about 15, 20 years in retirement. So that is the initial goals that this family had outlined. And when we showed them this picture, he kind of thought, okay, well, this is it. I knew it. I knew I didn't have enough and I would have to keep working beyond 65, leave corporate and consult and still have the pressure of earning an income because these days people live well beyond 85. And so what I'm going to do is now show you the after picture, what their portfolio looked like once we had finished our interventions. And then I will show you what that graph looked like once we had finished the interventions as well. So let me get my marker. So once again, what you can see here on the bottom left-hand corner is about the retirement funds. One thing we did was we got rid of that retirement annuity. We withdrew the tax-free amount out of it, 550,000 Rand, and then we turned it into a living annuity. There are reasons why we did that, and in a future video, we will dive into that. But for now, that's just kind of an after picture of what that portfolio looked like, his retirement funding. What we also did was we reduced the amount of contributions he's putting into the pension fund every month. As you may or may not know, you get a tax deduction up to 430,000 Rand contributed to a retirement fund. That is the maximum you can get in South Africa. So every year you contribute 430,000. That is the maximum deduction you can qualify for based on your overall income. And so now he was contributing over 600,000 Rand to the retirement fund. What we did was we diverted some of those contributions to other investments. What you might see on the right-hand side is those endowments are gone. And those endowments are gone because they were simply rubbish. They were very expensive. They had fees of several percent per product, and they were not invested optimally. So we made them more aggressive. And what we also did was reallocate all of Mr. Dube's capital into more meaningful buckets. So instead of having a bucket for a goal, like for example, some people might come to us and say, I've never had a travel fund. I should have a travel fund. Or we need to set up a university fund for our children. That is one way of investing. But over the years, through trial and error and through the evidence that we have seen play out into reality, we have determined that the better way to invest is not necessarily for a specific goal, but it's for periods of time. So what I mean by that is if you have goals between, say, now and 10 years' time, you want enough money available kept aside to fund those goals. And that's what we did for this family. So for the next 10 years, we kept aside 500,000 Rand and we invested it rather conservatively. Then for the next 10 to 20 years, we kept another 750,000 Rand and it's invested more aggressively. And then we looked at 20 plus years and that money was invested quite aggressively. In a future video, what we're going to do is actually go into each of those portfolios and show you what they look like for real clients, for ourselves, when we invest for ourselves, and for the families that we serve. And so you'll get a peek into the asset allocations, the costs, and everything else that goes with the investments that we set up for our clients. And so we made this much more efficient. We started getting money working a lot harder for this family, money that needed to work harder because they had more time available, 20 plus years. And then money that was needed sooner, we invested it a bit more aggressively than that money market fund, but not as aggressively as the 20 plus year bucket. Now, let me jump into just one or two of these quickly. Firstly, the emergency fund. It wasn't there before. It was a dumping ground for excess cash. I said before, and I'll say it again, it's very common for families to do this, not to know what to do with money, so you put it in an interest-bearing account. Here, we've reduced it to 450,000 Rand. And 450,000 Rand was the exact cost of their expenses per month times 3. 3 months worth of living costs if they lose their employment now. So 3 months worth of living costs, there's an emergency fund, and then we forget about that money pretty much forever. We set up a tax-free savings account. We took 46,000 Rand, we dumped it into that tax-free savings account, and then from next year, in the new tax year, the maximum contribution will happen to that fund every year until retirement. Furthermore, the contributions to future investments have been broken up into different funding goals. In fact, I will show you that on the cash flow screen, which is quite interesting to see how that money flows. Then on the last thing I want to show you here quickly, and this is normally the best, this is the thing that makes our clients the happiest, and it made this family extremely happy. You will see there are 3 insurance products here, which is all the group life cover. All the group scheme cover that Mr. Dube has through his employer is still there. It has to be there, and it's very important to have it. But there was that additional block here, that life insurance cover that was there from years ago when it was sold to them. They no longer needed it. It was most definitely surplus to requirements. And so we could comfortably get rid of that cover and save that family several thousand Rand a month. And that several thousand Rand a month could be redirected to investments. Now, let me quickly show you what that cash flow looks like in terms of the contributions to the new investments. Now, you might remember previously, the money was all going to a pension fund. Some was going to the retirement annuity. Some was going to the endowments. And most of it was going to that bank account. And so here what we've done is we've broken it up into different funding pools to provide liquidity for different areas of life. And so now the pension contribution has been reduced to the maximum you can contribute every month. The tax-free savings account is being contributed to, especially from next year onwards, once the annual limit is reached. The goal funding bucket for 10 plus years' time is being funded with 18,000 Rand a month. And then we've got this bucket over here. This is the 20 plus year bucket. This is the money that's going to be required when they're deep into their 70s, hopefully. 27,000 and a half is going in there. And so where did that money come from? It's made up of 3 things. Firstly, the retirement fund money that was being over-contributed, which has now been diverted, the life insurance premium, and the income from this new living annuity that used to be the retirement fund, the retirement annuity. All 3 of those things together can now be contributed to an investment. What we have not done is magically make more money available for this family. We've used everything they have already, but just applied some good strategy and intention to this money. And now let's look at what the future looks like for this family. Like I told you before, this is a real scenario. This is based on real families that we serve. And this is a real outcome. In fact, just this week before filming, we had a meeting with a family where this was the outcome as well. And so now Mr. Dube, 55, and his wife, who really want him to retire as soon as possible, sees that we're using the same amount of money, but just intentionally invested and optimized. He can now potentially live the life that him and his wife want to live for the rest of their lives. And you can see by this dark gray line over here, this is a whale graph, and this whale is massive because it never ends. It doesn't look like they would be able to run out of money if they tried. Now, you might think, okay, cool, that's great. That's the end of the story. Now this family can go and we can implement all these products and make the changes and they're going to be happy with life. But our clients are ambitious and our clients are driven and our clients are happy to see what trade-offs they need to make to actually live the life they want to live. And so we said to them, well, do you want to die with too much money? Do you want to die with millions and millions? Or do you want to die with many more experiences many more memories that you've had before. What can we do to make your major dream come true? And that is to reduce the amount of time you actually need to work for your employer right now. And so I said, let's just take that 65 and say, let's retire at 60 rather. Now, this is a massive change because you must remember all that money that's been contributed to investments, all of the compounding of money, it's going to be reduced by half the term effectively from 55 initially to 65, now 50 to 60. And so now we see what does that look like for this family. Unless they plan on living beyond 112, they shouldn't actually have a problem. Now, you must remember, we never factored in any sort of bonuses that this family generally gets. We don't believe we count on bonuses because bonuses are not guaranteed. We also didn't factor in any rental income. What we looked at was what we know and what we can control and how we can change it for the better. We did stress test this a bit further with them to see what else they can do. How much more can they spend on travel? How many more years rather, they can shave off of their working careers. But they were super happy with this outcome and they didn't want to go any further. And so this is just an example of taking what you have already, you earn well, you're getting to a point where you're 10 to 15 years away from retiring, you've got disposable income. What do you do with it? How do you direct it? And so the difference here is 85 to 112 when liquidity will become a problem in retirement. That's a massive difference. And that's the value that we were able to add by working with a family who wanted to work with us, who wanted to show up and to collaborate and to make more of their lives than what maybe their employers or what everyone else says is possible. I really hope that you found this valuable, that you saw this information and maybe saw yourselves in it as well, that you could relate to this portfolio, to this Dube family, and that you probably are looking for some similar outcome as well. Now, in the future, what we're going to do is we are going to record several videos based on this case study where we will dive deeper into specific facts and specific areas. Because I know this is a massive case study. There's a lot to unpack. And you might have thought, why did they do this? Or how did that graph end up becoming so big? In the future videos, we will go into all of the different areas and we will unpack it for you so you can actually see the nature of the advice that we provide and some of the things that you can maybe even do at home right now with your portfolios.